Hi, I'm Tamika Caston-Miller, and I am here to talk to you about a few yin yoga poses that are commonly experienced in a yin yoga class and how you can modify those poses for your body. Now, when it comes to modifications, this term can actually be thought of as making a pose easier, but that's actually not what's happening. We're actually just creating a variation on a pose for your body. And that might mean that your body is hyper flexible, or your body might be less flexible in a particular area. So whenever we're modifying our pose, we're just simply creating a variation of the pose. For intents and purposes of all of my videos on these types of modifications, I'll be using variation in my teaching, and I'll be using modification as it relates to these tutorials. So the very first pose that we're going to address is Pigeon, or Swan in Yin language. This is also Eka Pada Raja Kapotasana. And in this pose, what we find is a problem oftentimes is either a person's foot starts to go to sleep, or a person can't find the space that they want. And then if they're used to doing this pose a lot, then they can also have a lot of flexibility. So with Lenie, we have Lenie here who has a lot of flexibility and has to modify this pose for her to actually experience something in it besides just rest. And then in my body, I will modify the pose in order to accommodate fuller figure thighs, a little bit more mass, and then also tightness in the hips. So we will show you those variations right now. Okay, so first we'll show you the regular setup for Swan. So you'll first take your right knee behind your right wrist and your right foot behind your left wrist. Ideally, the shin is going to be, not ideally, but perhaps the shin will be parallel to the top of the mat. So you can see in Lenie's version here, her shin is parallel with the side of the mat here, and then knee and knee and ankles are right behind the wrist. This is not most people's flexibility. So I can already tell that she is hypermobile. All right, so the first thing is that you'll notice is when she comes into the pose, she can very easily roll in and out of the pose. And there's not any type of space really here between her pelvic floor and the mat. So we can already tell that she is hypermobile. Now, one thing that she can do is just utilize in an active class is really engage through the legs so that she can still actually feel something. But in a yin class, we're not going to have that. So an option for her is going to actually be able to bring this bolster underneath her shin. By putting the bolster underneath the shin now, this is forming more of a split, and this split action is going to be more allowing her to come to her edge. So we're showing it again from this angle so that you can see that now she's got more of this split action. And on a normal day when this isn't mind you, she's doing this absolutely cold. So for me and my body having more tightness in my hips, how I'm going to vary this pose is going to be a little different. The first thing that I want to do is I want to not sit on my foot. That causes discomfort for me. So what I'm going to do is bring the floor up underneath my chest so that my foot has more space. This is something that is a common problem whenever you cannot bring your foot up closer to the wrist. The entire weight of the body, of the chest and the navel, the stomach, waist, all of that is pressing down on the foot because the foot is underneath your torso instead of closer to the chest. So most of us will want to, who don't have that type of flexibility will want to bring the floor up to us. So the way that I have been sharing this with trainers and teachers all over is exactly the same way. So you may have seen this if you've been to any person who has ever visited my class. What I'm going to do is I'm going to need some things. Now, if you don't have blocks, remember you can always do this with blankets, and I definitely recommend investing in your practice and getting some blocks. I'm using more sturdy Manduka blocks. The soft blocks typically I don't like them as much. So notice that when I come into this pose, I am going to readjust my foot so that my left knee is behind my left wrist, but my left foot is it's about a foot away from my right wrist, which is fine and normal, yes? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to build up the side of my body that if I came down, I'm not going to be able to come down that much. So I can bring a block under the extended leg side. Now, you saw me put down 2 blocks because what I'm trying to do is bring the floor up to my torso, and the floor doesn't just go under my hip. You'll see oftentimes people will put a block underneath their bent leg side. I personally do not recommend that because for me, you still are going to be leaning over. This way, there's no lean. And I'm going to use this other block right underneath my chest. And I'm used to having a block on my chest, so I'm fine with that. If you're not, then go with the breastbone. But I prefer the block to come to my natural insulation, if you will. And then I can bring my head to a bolster or a third block. And what you'll see here is that there's more of this length along the entire side body. I'm not leaning in one way, shape, or form. It corrects that lean that we oftentimes see. So I recommend this. Another variation for folks that don't have as many things going on in the hips as I do is to just bring a bolster underneath the groin in general. So you're going to bring it between both legs so that the extended leg side has a cushion between it and your foot, and then come down. And now, if I never hold a yin posture like this where I'm just hinging on my forearms. So because I don't just want to hinge on my forearms, I can still bring this block underneath my chest and the other one underneath my head. So another option. So listen, y'all, the reality is that pigeon is not a comfortable pose for most people. A lot of people who come to yoga are naturally flexible people, which is why they like yoga, because yoga gives them an opportunity to experience something that is already somewhat easeful in the body. But for those of us who are coming to yoga either having had injuries or are coming to yoga later in life, or are runners, or are athletes who've been doing a lot of motions that have created tightness in the hamstrings and things like that, we are going to need a little bit more. And it has nothing to do with a level of activity or a level of inactivity. It has to do with natural flexibility that is just going to change over your time, the actual structure of your body, and actual questions around compression, soft compression. So for example, do you have more meat around more adipose tissue that's going to begin creating more compression situations? And I just mean soft compression. And all of those things come into play. So there's never a reason to feel bad about what the pose is or to force yourself into the pose. always allow for the pose to be adapted to your body so that you can actually do the work of the yoga, which is allowing for the mind stuff to be calmed. I hope that you've enjoyed this pigeon tutorial, swan tutorial with myself. Thank you so much to Lenie, and thank you to you for watching. I hope that you have a magical day.